Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Math Help homework video for Module 5, Lesson 18. Now, today we learned how to use a number line to compare fractions. And we did a little activity with some bean bags and tossing, and we learned that we compare fractions by talking about the distance from 0 on the number line. Now, we're going to start off with an example that's going to help you out with numbers 1 and 2 on your homework tonight. Now, if you take a look at the two fractions that are being compared here, they want us to compare 1/5 and 3/5. Now, if we look at the denominators, we know the denominator is what determines our unit. We can see that these fractions have a common denominator. They share the same denominator, which means that I'm going to be able to compare these by cutting up my number line into fifths. Now, we're going to create a number line. They already have it for you. But on our number line, we have the endpoints of 0 and 1. Now, when we are talking about fifths, how many parts do I need to cut my number line into? That's correct, 5. So I'm going to draw 4 lines to cut my number line into 5 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I've done that correctly. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to plot each of those fractions that I'm comparing on the number line. So my first fraction is 1/5. Well, I know when I'm talking about fractions, or fifths, 0 would now become the fraction 0/5. So if I build from there, we would have 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and of course 1 would be the same as 5/5, or 5 out of 5 parts, which would be 1 whole. Now if I want to plot each of those fractions, I could say this x would be 1/5, and maybe this dot would be 3/5, so that you can see the difference between the two. Now if I look at these, and I'm talking about the distance from 0. So if I go from 0 to my 1/5, it's that much space. And if I go from 0 to 3/5, it's way much more space, a lot further from 0. So when comparing those two fractions, I can see that 1/5 is less than 3/5 when comparing the distance from the 0 point on the number line. Now, using that as an example, you should be able to complete questions 1 and 2 on the front of your homework paper. So go ahead and pause your recorder and try 1 and 2. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you found questions 1 and 2 a little bit easier to work with after you watched the example earlier. Now we're going to take a look at a different kind. It's the same thing, but our fractions are different. Now if we take a look at the fractions we're comparing now, and we take a look at the units, our units are now different. Okay, back on the example we did before, we were talking about fifths with both fractions. This time I have the unit of sevenths and the unit of sixths. So I'm going to make a suggestion to you. I want you to use your pencil for one of them, and we're going to use maybe a crayon or a marker for the other. So if you need to, pause the recording and go get yourself a crayon or a marker. Okay, what we're going to do is we are again going to create our number line like they have on your homework paper with endpoints of 0 and 1. Okay, now I'm going to start off with just the first fraction. So I'm going to start off with 2/7. Now my unit for that is sevenths. So how many pieces do I need to cut up that number line into? That's right, 7. So I'm going to do that by drawing 6 lines. Okay, to be as close as I can to 7 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 equal spaces on the number line. Now if I was to now you're still using my pencil. 0 would now be 0/7. And if I go from there, this would be 1/7, and this would be 2/7. So I'm going to mark that space on my number line with my pencil. Okay, now I'm going to go back and erase these fractions. You can leave your tick marks there if it doesn't bother you. But now I'm going to pick a different color. So grab your marker or your crayon for this one. I'm going to choose my blue one. You can do whatever color you like. I'm going to use the colored marker or crayon to show 4/6. So if in 4/6, how many parts do I need to cut up the number line into? That's right, 6. So I'm going to ignore those tick marks. Now, if you cannot ignore those tick marks, then go ahead and erase them. That's why I had you do them in pencil. I'm going to ignore them, and I'm going to cut up my number line into 6 equal parts. It's a little hard to do if you can't ignore those tick marks, so I understand if you want to erase them. Now, if I'm talking about 6, my 0 now becomes 0/6. This first blue, or whatever color you're using, tick mark would be 1/6. This one would be 2/6. This would be 3/6. That means that this one would be 4/6. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase my other colored fractions that I put on here so they don't confuse me. Now I'm looking at 2/7 and 4/6. Now, remember, when comparing fractions, we're talking about the distance away from 0. So if I start at 0, is 2/7 less than 4/6 or greater than 4/6? Well, we learned today that the fraction that is further closest towards 0 would be a smaller fraction. So 2/7 is less than 4/6. Okay, now remember, if all these little extra tick marks bother you, I said you could erase those. Okay, so that when you're done, all you have left is the two that you're comparing. Now, let's try another one. And we'll try another one by erasing this time. Okay, so let's say we're going to compare, I'm going to cross these out. Let's compare 1/3 and 2/5. Okay, so if I take a look at my units this time, I can see right away that they're different units. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more work than ones we started with. I'm going to start with 1/3. I know that if I'm talking about thirds, that's how many parts? That's correct, 3 parts. So I'm going to cut up my number line into 3 equal parts. Now, if you're someone who's going to want to erase these, and we're going to erase them, so don't make your marks too dark. Okay, now, if I'm talking about thirds, then 0 now becomes 0/3. This part here would be 1/3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a dot or an X, whichever you prefer, on your number line to show 1/3. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase everything else except for that dot and its label. So that was 1/3 there. Okay, now I'm going to move over to my other fraction, which was 2/5. Now I'm going to take a look at that number line again, trying my hardest to ignore that dot and that label. When I'm talking about fifths, I am talking about the how many parts in the whole. That's right, we're talking about 5. So I'm going to take a look at my number line, and I'm going to cut up my number line into 5 equal parts, which means, and I'm going to use my marker or my crayon this time. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. That should give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal spaces. And if I go ahead and I label those tick marks with fractions, 0 now becomes 0/5. This first green tick mark is going to be 1/5. Then we have 2/5. Okay, I'm going to mark that spot on the number line with a green dot or whatever color crayon or marker you have. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase everything else except for those 2 spots. I'm going to take a look at them. And I'm going to remember that when comparing fractions on a number line, we are comparing the distance from 0. So 1/3 is, again, less than 2/5. Okay, so you can use your two different colors, your pencil and your marker or crayon to do the two different fractions. You can erase when you do the first one and put other tick marks in, whatever works best for you. But this practice we have done is going to help you with questions 3, 4, and 5 on the front, and it will help you with the word problem 6, 7, and 8 on the back. Now don't get confused with it being a word problem. Go sentence by sentence. Ask yourself if there's anything you can do with that information. Can you plot it on a number line? What does it ask me to do? One sentence at a time when it comes to word problems. Okay, give it your best shot, and I'll see you in the morning.